Hi, I'm V, a robot that knows all the nooks and crannies about skateboarding. As an AI assistant, I'll guide your skater eye through the vibrant, colorful city of San Vansterdam, or San Van as we like to call it. A city that was ruled by corporate overlords who used their power, influence, and hunger for profit to eradicate fun and self-expression.
Hold on. Does that sound familiar to you? Because if I'm being totally honest, that sounds familiar to me. Ladies and gentlemen, Skate Early Access is here after 5 years since its initial announcement. And while I wish I could parade around saying that this is the greatest thing I've ever played, in some ways it is, but unfortunately, in most ways, it's not. Given the magnitude of hype from a potential fourth entry in the EA Skate series, there were some pretty big shoes to fill off the strength of what they established with the first 3 games. And so when they announced that Skate was coming back, obviously the community exploded. But unfortunately, given the oversight on this project, I don't think this game is going to live up to what we expected had we otherwise gotten a Skate 4. But for this video, I'm just going to talk about what it is and not what it otherwise could have been, because everybody has their own ideas of such. But because EA is finally letting everyone in on the game today, and my previous couple videos were about Skate anyway, I figured I'd go ahead and give my fully unfiltered thoughts on Skate Early Access. To be completely honest, let me start off by saying I didn't really think I was going to be playing the game in the weeks leading up to early access, because for one, the game is still extremely early like it was in all the previous playtests over the past 3 to 4 years, and two, within the closed private testing, which I have participated in a little bit, progress would essentially reset for every update. So naturally, if a game was a few years out and the closed testing was going to be held for around that same amount of time, then for the most part, I wasn't really going to be playing it. I want to play the game when it's complete, when it's close to being complete, when it's the most feature complete that it can be for the public to play. That's when I want to get in. But I was checking my email one of these days and saw that I was in the playtest, so I decided to give the game a fair shot. And that's where we begin. You start creating your character. Once your character is finished being created, then it'll spawn you on this tutorial island where V, yes, the AI assistant that was in the beginning of this video, I simply just don't know whose idea that was, starts teaching you the ropes of the game through the controls, and then you progress throughout the tutorial map. You get to figure things out, and once you complete everything, you feel comfortable, then it'll take you to the current main map in San Vansterdam. I say current because this untextured plot of land across the bridge was the original map that they were working on. I'm sure it's subject to come back at some point as part of an expansion or content release. If you're generally familiar with how the progression loop works in these free-to-play games, they like to make it a very slow burn. The first act of quests will tend to get you familiar with the gameplay loop itself, and this game is no different. When you first spawn into San Vansterdam, V and Izzy will take you through Hedgemont until eventually Shingo and Slappy are reintroduced into the mix, but no cutscenes, just talking PNGs. I'm assuming we didn't have the budget for it. But once you get started on those first couple missions in Hedgemont, the missions start to unlock on different parts of the map. That is essentially the gameplay loop. They weren't lying when they said it's not like the previous games, because while the loop itself is virtually the same, the context was what people really enjoyed. You started off as a rookie and you met filmers, you got brand deals, you moved up, you got board sales and all kinds of stuff going. So there was a genuine sense of progression. And let me be totally clear, the idea of a live service skate game actually sounded really cool to me on paper, but in practice, you know what? I'm gonna get to that later. So granted that it's a live service game, the incentive to completing all of these challenges is to unlock cosmetics. Because if you remember the first boardroom, there's gonna be no paid loot boxes in the new Skate. Well, you gotta hand it to them how carefully it was worded, because while there are no paid loot boxes, guess what there is? Loot boxes. And this was leaked a few years ago. I remember when an article came out after the first boardroom episode that said, oh yeah, apparently there are going to be loot boxes in the new Skate game. Well, you had to figure why they were saying things like this in the first place, because we knew it was going to be free. And I guess people will give you different answers depending on who you ask, how they feel about what's in the loot boxes, like the cosmetics themselves. But the system itself is terrible. It's just absolutely horrible. When you complete these challenges, you get what's called rip chips, and that currency can be used to open up these boxes, which are priced at different ranges. Not really based on quality or the amount of items that are in a particular box, they're just priced differently, I guess. I don't know. And while there is some name brand stuff, none of it is really compelling enough to make you want to grind through an entire map of challenges just to get a few of the things available in some of these boxes. And this whole loop is set up by thresholds. If you're not a certain level, then you can't do challenges in these other districts. And if you're not in these other districts, then you're restricted from the cosmetics that the boxes in those districts hold. So you're essentially forced to be in Hedgemont for a certain amount of time so that you can move on to doing challenges in other districts. And then when you do the loop there, then you can get some of the cosmetics in those districts to go ahead and move on to the next one. I believe Goldcrest and Market Mile kind of unlock around the same time, but still just a pretty underwhelming way of going about things in terms of progression, in my opinion. Especially when the previous way of doing things was just to allow the player to equip whatever they wanted as they saw fit. Whereas this current system gives a false pretense of progression that is otherwise just restriction. But as for the cosmetics themselves, I think they're actually pretty decent with the more boxes you start to unlock. After all these years since the graphic editor shut down in Skate 3, grip tapes finally have some flair to them again. There's colors, patterns, decks now have stickers. Although making them work with a deck and having them not look awkward is not too common with the available cosmetics in the game, or I guess that's just kind of how they look when you slap things on top of the deck anyway. They've got all sorts of hats, not that many shoes just yet. The Nike SB Dunks have not been added to the game after being teased several times in playtest footage. And I know for some of us that like to go for a classic look, we got our baggy jeans, our button-ups. Obviously you got your t-shirts and whatnot, hoodies. But yeah, in terms of the clothing, I actually think it's not one of the game's many negatives, especially because as the game develops, they're just going to add more cosmetics anyway. So I'm sure this isn't something we really need to be given too much critical feedback about. My critical feedback is more about the progression loop and the monetization system. But again, live service, free to play. And the part to me that's so strikingly dumb about it is that they designed a background for an actual skate shop. And to add insult to injury, when you level up in these districts, you have to teleport to a fully textured 3D modeled shop, which you cannot enter, just to open up the menu that you've been opening up to open these boxes the entire time. That's a lot of opening, I know. But why couldn't we have the actual interaction of walking into a shop? If we went through the trouble of 3D modeling and texturing what looks to be a shop, because we didn't skip that part of the equation, then why, when deciding to add interaction with this part of the game, which requires you to go to these shops on the parts of the map respective to the district, is it just going to open up a menu anyway? And when I say adding interaction to this part of the game, I'm not saying that it was revolutionary in the trilogy either. There was just a menu to open up for those clothes as well. But again, when we're talking about a sequel to the most beloved skating franchise in video games, as I mentioned before, the expectations were high. And to be honest, this has been in development for 5+ years. So the fact that this is what we got, I really don't think that a walk-in shop, especially when Tony Hawk was able to do this in the early 2000s, is really that big of an ask. I mean, in GTA, just imagine walking up to the clothing store, but before you go through the door, there's a menu that pops up, and then you have to randomly pick out of which one of the categories of clothes you want. Okay, that's fine. I want to go to the shirts category. Nope, we can't pick out the shirts. They're gonna pick a shirt out for you. And the best part is, you can't even see how none of the shit looks before you get it. My issue is that it's not even a matter of the game being damn near perfect, but it's rough around the edges here and there with some bugs or optimization issues or some missing features. No, that's really not what's going on. The package as a whole, the product is just a subpar product. When considering the gameplay progression loop, tone policing, the missing modes, the incomplete features, and the fact that there's no guarantee this game will even be around by this time next year, then to be completely honest, I think the best rating I can give this game in its current state is a 4 out of 10. And I think even at its best, probably 2 years down the line, I might see myself giving this game a 7 out of 10. Hopefully the game makes it that far. I really do want to enjoy a new EA Skate game. I know the lion's share of Legacy fans are just asking for a trilogy remastered, but what we really wanted at the end of the day was a Skate 4. That's what we want. We've been playing the trilogy for the last 10 years, so while a remastered collection actually would be pretty sick, I would buy that. We just want the dream game in Skate 4 that we've always been asking for, which is not really much. But instead, we got some free-to-play live service slots. So while I do want to enjoy a new EA game, if this is the game that we're going to be playing for the next few years, then chances are I'm just going to be free skating most of the time. And even then, with other games that are coming out like Arc Raiders and 2SKO just recently dropped their closed beta a week ago, my intention on this, given what what they decided to do with this game is going to be extremely limited. And look, I know I already gave my verdict and it's nearing towards the end of this video, but speaking of 2SKO, you know how much money Riot makes? Tell me why the fuck it was so easy for them to just come out and say, oh yeah, you guys want an offline mode? Here. You guys want a mode where you could just play locally or in the training room irrelevant of your connection? Yeah, sure, here you go. 2SKO is a free-to-play game and they're going to be hoping to make a fuck ton of money off that. They said, oh, folks want offline? Sure, let's give them offline. And with all due respect, the people in charge of 2SKO are relevant to the community that they're in. They have the inventors of rollback netcode. The music is damn good. The developers actually speak the language of the FGC and they talk about why they make the decisions they make. I said, all right, you know what? If they want to make a game that people actually want to play, then I'm just going to go over there and do that. Let EA or Full Circle work out whatever they got going on here. And if the game is better later on, then I'll play it. But with other titles constantly asking for attention from the consumer, if it's not really offering anything worthwhile, then it's just gonna have to be sitting on the sideline. And unfortunately, if you're a Legacy fan, I can just guarantee you that this game is just not offering anything special. If you just want to play it purely for the skating and don't care about anything else, great. The game is perfect, almost damn near perfect in that regard. And if you're just getting into the game for the first time, I'm sure you'll enjoy the progression loop for maybe a couple hours or so. But if you are not naturally into skateboarding games and can find the creativity, time, and space to really just kind of live out the map, creating your own experience, then frankly, chances are this game may not really be your forte. But anyways, yeah, so those are my first impressions of Skate Early Access. Let me know in the comment section below if you agree or disagree on anything. How's your experience been with Skate Early Access? I do want to read about that. I'm interested to know. If you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button with the bell. I am going to be making some video essays on some other stuff. And if you're feeling up to it, make sure to join the Discord as well. We are going to be playing lots of 2SKO, especially as the game heads into launch. But that's all for today. I will see you guys next time.